Good morning. We are in a five-part series with a new and dear friend of mine. I get to pick her brain about this five-part series. We're building stronger relationships, building teams with our ideas around communication. Hello and welcome to Living with Favor, where we talk about faith, abundance, vitality, overflow, and relationships. My mission is to inspire and encourage your entrepreneurial spirit, and the promise of my show is to introduce you to expert guests who will help uncover the secrets of living with favor and growing our businesses. I'm Lisa Mosbey, your host of Living with Favor. Thank you so much for tuning in and letting us offer a bit of advice. Today or this whole month, my special guest is Miss Becky Sheehan, and she is an intuitive empathic intuitive healer. And she's a coach that specializes in empowerment, communication, and radical self-love. And when I read her bio, I said, I need to know more about that. I love those words, empowerment, communication, and radical self-love. We lose sight of that. So Becky uses her intuitive guidance to understand where clients are limited, stuck, and suffering in their lives, and she aids them in uncovering and clearing the limiting perceptions, attitudes, and beliefs. I want you to write my bio. Welcome, Miss Becky. Thank you for being
Hi.
here with me again. Week 4 we're on. We've just been digging deeper into all things around communication, and today we're talking about that leadership toolbox. So
Mm.
welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. This is going to be a really interesting conversation. I really am just a champion for good, healthy, honest, vulnerable, authentic communication. I think that it solves all the problems when you can figure out what that looks like and how to navigate that. And I think leadership is one of those places that people sort of get caught up in how what that looks like and how to best do that.
Yeah.
So this is going to be a really powerful conversation. I can't wait.
Yeah. I think we should first start by kind of defining leadership. I think that you looked it up. There's definitely a dictionary version of leadership. But I think there's also a vast array of definitions that each of us hold, whether you're an athlete, maybe leadership is the coach that you have, or you're in school and it's the teacher or the administration. Those are the leaders. Or maybe you are in business. I mean, this is a business show. We're talking to business people. What does leadership look like if you're an entrepreneur versus an employee versus a volunteer? There's so many ways that we can define leadership, but what stands out most for you when you think of leaders in your life, in your world?
I always think of this vision of a conductor, right? In an orchestra or a symphony. It's somebody that's able to see all the different people that come into play in whatever it is that they're trying to build or do. And they're able to see what each individual person's strengths are. Like, in an orchestra where you have this section, this section, this section, this section, all these different people have all these different jobs and they shine in different ways. And it's this ability to sort of bring everybody together to see not only what they do, but to bring them together in just the right time, just the right way, just the right space. That when they collectively come together and use their gifts and use their tools, what's created is something of strength. It's something impactful and powerful and quite beautiful. So I think leaders in that sort of same position where they really
Mhm.
understand everybody that they're working with. They understand their needs. They understand what conditions or what tools they need to have available to really do their job the best and really shine the brightest. And they're able to figure out who works best with who and what capacity or where to put them so that everybody's confident, everybody's comfortable, and everybody is really able to shine brightly.
Yeah. Hmm. A lot of times we think of leadership as the term that comes to mind is boss. And when I think of a boss is somebody that's kind of dictates this is the process, this is what works, our outcomes, these are the goals or objectives, versus boss versus leader. Um, I always thought of leader as somebody that kind of leads from the back. Like I'm observing, I'm letting the flock go out there and do what it is that they do best. And I just guide the path, I guide their actions. Um, There was a famous quote. I should have looked this up before I hopped on here. I'm going to take a stab at it. I think it was from Lao Tzu, and it said that a leader's job a leader knows that their job is done when the team has accomplished what it is they were accomplishing, and they don't know that they've been led. It's almost like a
Mm.
secret agent action that you nurture the team, and you nurture the group that you're working with, and you draw out their strengths, just like the conductor. They're quiet, they're silent, they're moving up there, but we don't hear from them as the audience. It's all about the people that are in the orchestra doing what it is that they do best. And that conductor is just like, coaching them on and pulling them out, and directing who's next. And I love that analogy. I think it's
Yeah.
perfect.
And a
Perfect.
conductor's on the stage with you. They're
Yeah.
not yelling out directions from the wings of a
Yeah.
stage.
Yeah.
They're a part of the team. They're right there with you. And I think a really strong, effective leader are those people that are in it with the people that they're leading. They're taking part, they're taking action. They are a part of that sort of collective creation process.
Hmm.
And that really makes a strong leader.
Yeah.
When there are leaders that try to separate themselves and sort of govern over a
Yeah.
group, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I do feel like it creates this separation and a wall of disconnection where um you really want to, in order to be a really strong leader, in order to have your voice really hold value, I feel like, to employees, they really want to be able to have some sort of point of connection with you. They really need to be able to talk to you and have you be accessible to them and have you, you know, be a part of their process in some powerful, strong way. I think that's really essential. And I think that's what makes a great uh, leader who can lead with that sort of vulnerability, right? So we're getting rid of that disconnection and really allowing points of connection where you can sort of have like a more group dynamic and you're more of a team dynamic. The leader's part of the team, you know?
The culture. Yeah. Creating, one of the points I wrote down was the creating the culture. How do we create a culture as leaders? What kind of culture do we want to create when we are bringing in vulnerability and authenticity and using emotional intelligence, or encouraging emotional intelligence for when people show up? How does that help us to create a culture? Oh, the other thing that came to mind, the ivory tower. Are you the leader that's in the ivory tower? Are you the leader that's in the bullpen? Or are you the leader that's just part of the team, part of the culture? What does it look like in your organization? Or what do you want it to look like? What are you moving towards?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So how do we create that inclusive culture? Thoughts on that?
That's a really interesting question. Communication, right? Just real, and everything sort of circles right back to that,
Always.
right?
Everything comes back to that. It really
Yeah.
does. It really does. Yeah. Are
Creating
there
an
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, creating an environment where everybody feels comfortable enough to be honest in their communication, right?
Yeah.
And um that's really important because you really need to know what is happening. Like what's the current situation at hand? Where are our weakness? Where is our strengths? How does everybody feel about this project? Is there confusion? Is there miscommunication? Does anything need to be clarified? You need to know all of those things in order to formulate the best sort of plan of action for your team. And without that information, um, like whatever plan that you formulate, given whatever limited information you might not be the best plan. It might not be effective. It might not be going in the direction that you want it to go in. So, really, sort of fostering an environment where people feel safe to be honest about what they're experiencing, whether it be confusion, whether it be, I'm not really sure how this affects this, whatever that looks like, that those pieces of information are absolutely vital. When you have all the puzzle pieces out, you need all the puzzle pieces out to put the puzzle together and create the picture that you're desiring to create. Without it, you're just you got holes. Like,
Yeah.
I'm looking at it as like it's a puzzle, right? You got a bunch of holes there, and you're trying to figure out, like, I'm missing things. How
Yeah.
did I miss things? Where'd that puzzle piece go? What happened? You spend a lot of time and energy trying to figure out what's going on and fill those pieces. Um, than if you had all that information to begin with.
Yeah. So how do we assess that? Are there assessment tools? Let's jump into the toolbox. We've defined leadership. We
Hmm.
know communication is critical to leadership. What is the toolbox? What does the toolbox start to look like? How do we assess um, the emotional intelligence of our group and move in that direction of figuring out how to support them in their daily activities?
Yeah, that's a really good question. The first thing that comes to my mind would be to really start scheduling one-on-one talks and conversations with your
Regularly,
employees.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And just really just have a conversation with them. Ask questions. Really try to see where they're at, see what their experience is, and allow them to look at you in that relationship and whatever relationship that you have in that workplace environment as being a safe space, a safe person for them to talk to.
mhm,
Maybe you need to sort of facilitate that by letting them know, hey, I just wanted to check in with you. If you have any sort of, if you notice, did you see any sort of challenges that you might be experiencing? Or are you okay? I just really want you to feel comfortable if there's anything going on that you can come to me and talk to me about that. And I'm here to help you. I'm here to be accessible to you. I really want you to have the best experience when you come to work every single day. And so,
mhm,
whatever I can do to help foster or create that for you, I want you to know that I'm here and available. And then, really sort of just lay that sort of foundation with each individual employee, not look at them collectively, look at them for the people that they are. They're unique, beautiful, talented people on your team. Get to know them, really start to see their talents, really start to see where it is that they shine, and really have the insight to notice where they might be struggling and figure out how to best support them so that they can live in that space of just shining.
hmm. I think for me, what comes to mind is like step 2 and 3 of that would be, what kind of maybe a self-reflective questionnaire could you share with somebody during that interview or during that process? Help them to maybe reflect on how they're showing up in the workplace. Are they honest with each other? Are they, authentic? Do they share their opinion? Do they sit back and wait to be told what to do, or do they step into a leadership position? Are there like self-reflective questionnaires we could use, or maybe like a vulnerability index where people can assess their vulnerability or how vulnerable they feel? There may be some of these kinds of tools that could be available to folks. Have you had any experience with that? You mentioned paint what done looks like as an exercise, as an activity to work with people. Does that fit into
Oh,
either of these categories?
I feel like it does.
Yeah.
Brene Brown beautifully illustrates in her leadership book, Dare to Lead, this process of painting what done looks like when you are giving tasks to your employees or your team. Um, they need to understand or have a picture of what the end result looks like to you so that they can live up to producing or giving you exactly what it is that you're looking for. There's so often where we can ask for things and we what the end result is technically what we asked for, but it wasn't the way that we wanted it, right? It wasn't sort of the way that we pictured it or had it in mind. It's just very technically they did what you asked, but it wasn't the way that you wanted it done. I don't know about you, but my kids do this in my home all the time. I don't know if you had that in your family experience with your nephews or nieces or
Yeah.
whatnot, but they I ask them to do something and they technically do it and it's done wrong for mommy. It's done
Yeah.
wrong for mommy. It's still a mess. Things are still all over the place. They put their Barbie dolls away, but they left the Play-Doh and everything else like right there in the middle of the floor. It
Yeah.
wasn't the picture that I had in mind. So, painting done is really sort of giving people the opportunity to see what the end result looks like from your eyes, from your perspective, and allowing them with that picture and with that vision to show up more powerfully and effectively for you and whatever it is that you're trying to achieve. And that's
Mhm.
such an important piece of the picture because part of painting done is in that process, when you're explaining what your end result looks like, what everything's cleaned up from the floor, the Play-Doh's all put away, like the kinetic sand's all swept up, and whatever doesn't fit in the thing goes in the garbage. They might be able to pinpoint some sort of things like, okay, well, we don't have a broom anymore to clean up that kinetic sand, remember? Because we threw away the last broom because it got so dirty and yucky and you told us that you don't want that broom anymore. You need a new broom. So that's going to be hard for me to do without a broom. Or yeah, the Play-Doh, I can put away the Play-Doh, but like some of this Play-Doh is really old and dried up and maybe we don't put away that Play-Doh. Maybe we start throwing out that Play-Doh. All these different things will start to appear when you picture what that end result is because now they see what you had in mind and they see all the little problems that you might not have thought of into that will keep you from getting that final picture.
Yeah.
So, with that awareness, you're just able to be like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that. I didn't think about that. Okay, so what do we need now? I need to go out and buy a broom so that we can get that aspect done. And yes, we should go ahead and, toss out the Play-Doh. So you don't need to, that's not a part of my end result picture anymore. The Play-Doh neatly put in stacks. I can take that out of my picture. And you start to readjust in all those different spaces. So now that you have a different sort of end picture and it's able to be done with efficiency and with that same sort of integrity that you want it to be or look like.
Yeah. I love doing that with the employee. What came to mind for me is it's not just me painting my picture of what I would ask the people that I'm working with, painting that picture, what I see is done, but getting it from them. Like, here's the project that you're on. Can you paint done for me so that I can follow you so that I know where you're going with this? I am, I don't consider myself to be a micromanager. I don't like to be a micromanager. I want someone to just know what I need to have done and just take care of it. We have on the Morning Rush, which is a leadership group that Becky and I are part of. We have a new participant, a new executive assistant who's running it, and she sees something that needs to be done and she does it. She creates a flyer when we've shared some things that we want to happen. She just like she steps in there and she knows what to do. She's blessed in her talents and her gifts and can listen and make things happen. And I think so often we don't look at our employees or people that we're working, maybe not employee, maybe it's a partner. If you're an entrepreneur, maybe use independent consultants, staff, the people that you work with. We don't empower them to use their gifts to express what they do best or to just do what they do best. When we paint that picture of what it is that we need, let them step into the how. No, we don't always have to know the how,
Yes.
or at least I'm finding that I don't always have to know the how. I have the vision, I have the outcome, I have the destination, and now I can empower people around me to help me get there, help me walk the journey, help me figure out the how. That's
Yeah.
what that exercise sounds like for me. I love it.
And
Oh,
and you know what's important part of that is to really have leaders that look at it as a team effort rather than that area of separation where some person has to devise the plans and everything and then everybody else is just there to execute it. There's that disconnection. When you look at it as a team environment, when you say, hey, this is what we're trying to do, here
yeah.
are the ideas that we have in place to do it. Does anybody else have any sort of input or suggestions or anything that they see that might make this process easier? Having that sort of open communication and conversation where other people can join in, like, well, you don't really need to do this and this. We can do it this way. And then it covers that, 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 that. And you're like, amazing, beautiful. Let's incorporate that in that plan now. So now it's more of a team effort where everybody's able to add to it and to make it more powerful, make it a more powerful execution. Because we're one, leadership is just usually a couple of people, maybe it's one person, maybe it's a couple of people that we have, our own unique point of view and perspective. But what's really fascinating, interesting is when you hear other people's points of views and perspectives, and they might have seen things the way that you never thought of looking at it before, and they might have ideas that you never even considered before. And I would rather make a more well-informed decision as a leader that considers all the different possibilities and in mind, and make like a very sort of strategic, well-informed decision than make a decision from a limited mindset or limited point of view.
Inclusive again, inclusive, yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, I looked up that quote that I was talking about from Lao Tzu. It says, "A leader is best when people barely know he exists. When his work is done, his aim fulfilled, they will say, 'We did it ourselves.'" Because you're empowering them.
Yeah.
I don't know. I learned that really, really young, early in my career, because I've been an entrepreneur for 40 years. Uh, that it's not about me. Being a leader, it's not necessarily about you. You are the coach. You don't have to do all the work. You don't have to come up with all the ideas. You need to facilitate collaboration amongst your team. That's how I like to be as a leader. I don't know if it's good or bad. That's my skill set, is to facilitate, to draw out and bring in. I don't always have the best ideas, and I don't always have the best know-how, but I can extract that from other people. So that totally describes me as how I like to lead, where they say, "We did it ourselves."
Yeah. How
Yeah, I
beautiful
don't
is
need
that?
credit. It's not about credit for me. It's about accomplishment, about outcome. So you
Yeah.
mentioned Brene Brown. I'm a huge fan of Simon Sinek. He is an extraordinary leader. The work that he has done on optimism, I find myself to be a fairly optimistic person. That's how I was raised. And I love him as a leader and somebody to follow as a leader. Are there other resources, other people that you'd want to share with folks for them to maybe dive in deeper and look to for leadership
Oh,
ideas?
oh my goodness. I don't know. I'm trying to think. You put me on
Ooh,
the spot.
I got another one. I got another
What
one.
is it?
John Maxwell. John
John
Maxwell. You know
Maxwell.
John Maxwell? Yeah, I've always
Yeah.
wanted to do his leadership public speaking training course, teaching from the stage. But he has some great books on leadership and bringing your faith into your business, and being a Christian leader. So that's another great tool.
Yeah.
Lots of
Absolutely.
free books that I like.
Absolutely. I know as far as like vulnerability and that sort of standpoint is there's a really interesting uh I guess she has a PhD. So I guess she's a doctor. Her name is Kristen Neff. And she does great work. She studies self-compassion. And I think that that is such an important aspect too, for really allowing or really developing a skill around self compassion for when you get things wrong, which is inevitability in life. There's certain things that are not just going to roll out the way that you expect. And instead of going into those states of wrongness, instead of beating yourself up about it, which can often keep you locked in a cage, really sort of developing this skill of self-compassion, and so that it develops resiliency, right? Okay, I'm that didn't go well. Okay. But this is an opportunity for me to be in forgiveness, understanding that's okay. It didn't go well. What can I learn from this opportunity? What can I learn from this experience? And how can I continue to move forward in that direction? I feel like that's something that great leaders should have in their tool belt, is a really strong sense of self-compassion and to encourage that sort of spirit with their team as well. Um, I think that society as a whole, we're just sort of like in that self-flagellation whenever we get things wrong, right? We're
Yeah.
just like, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Like, I don't know if it's like how a lot of us older generations were brought up, but it was sort of like if you got something wrong, you not only get whatever sort of reprimand or punishment comes, or you have to receive it from the outside, you kind of give it to yourself too. And that serves no purpose. Like that doesn't help you in sort of rebounding
Yeah.
from that experience. We really want resilience to see resiliency in work. We want to be able to rebound. We want to be able to be like, okay, that was a learning experience. What can we do next to like change that experience or move it forward? Or what else? What other ideas can we come up with? Maybe we had like a bad experience at work, maybe a bad presentation. That's okay. We're going to learn from that. We can take a moment to be upset about that, but now how are we going to learn from that? How can we rebound from that? Is that something that we can save in that moment, or can we use what we learned to really sort of move forward in a more productive and healthy way? And I think a really big part of that is to be able to have those skills of compassion and forgiveness for not being perfect, not showing up, we're not perfect individuals. We're not perfect beings. So Kristen Neff does really amazing work in that area. And I'm a big fan of hers.
Okay. Yeah, other word that popped in when you were saying resiliency is conflict resolution. We're gonna run into scenarios where we're not in alignment. And so how do we get into alignment? We're working for a common good, we're working for a common cause or a common outcome. If there's conflict within the team, how do we resolve that?
Yeah. I
I
think
know
is
it all comes to communication. You have to be able to talk about it. Always, always, always. All of these things, whether it's authenticity, vulnerability, conflict, resiliency, it all comes down to communication. Do you have any insight on that conflict resolution piece of it?
you have to be willing, I feel like, to want and be open to seeing things through the lens of somebody else.
Mhm.
That's sometimes difficult thing for people to do. People want to be right. People want to be correct. They're planting their right flag. I know everything in this moment, like strongly into that ground. But when you're in conflict with somebody, it's really important to see or be able to recognize what that situation looks like from their perspective and point of view.
I think that comes to listening. Now we're getting into that active listening. So much of what we've been
Yeah.
talking about is how we communicate, meaning speaking. Now we need to shift gears and get into active listening. How do we improve our listening skills to be, empathetic and
Mhm.
understanding and open to what they're experiencing and what their needs are without just saying my way or the highway?
Yeah. Part of, what I found works for me is to have this moment where I put my emotional response like on pause. I love emotions. I'm like and a very emotionally led girl. Emotions are important. But in communication, especially in conflict resolution, there needs to be sort of like this separation for I'm just going to put my emotions here on the side and for a second so that we'll address that in a moment. But I really want to see from an understanding standpoint how this other person is looking at this situation, what it is that they're seeing, what it is that they're experiencing and feeling before I bring my emotions and feelings involved into that conversation. I really want them to see things through my lens, and I want to see things through their lens. And maybe in just putting the emotions aside for just a second and really just sort of having a perspective conversation, um, you find a lot of those areas where, oh, now I understand why this is so upsetting for them. Now I understand why this is not working for them. And I'm going to explain what my experience was so that they understand where I was coming from and what my perspective is. So now we have two very beautifully painted pictures of what the experience is. And from there, we can sort of create that halfway point, that meeting, and then we address the emotional aspects after that. Because sometimes it's just melding those two pictures together to create a new version of reality where we're both participating in that creation of what the reality is. That's really powerful, and often I've found resolves conflicts just in that process. Because a lot of the times, most of the conflict is that we're not seeing each other. We're not seeing the same thing through the same way.
Right. Yeah.
Our pictures are completely different. And when we don't have enough information about what somebody else's picture looks like to them, um, we don't have any sort of understanding of that. So we're just meeting whatever their emotional reaction is for it. We don't have any sort of clarity or insight. We're just receiving their emotions. And when somebody throws a lot of emotions at you, it's triggering and it makes you want to throw a lot of emotions back.
Yeah.
And that's really where the conflict is. It's not really a matter of insight. It's a matter of emotions just warring off at each other. So
Yeah.
when you
Listening
take
kind of
that
goes out
moment,
the window, right? At that
yeah,
point, listening goes out and it's just response or react. Yeah.
yeah, it's just reaction, 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 and it gets elevated
Mhm.
really, really fast because emotions feed off of each other and they blow up and blow up and blow up and blow up. So when you just take a pause, like pause, we're going to just put the emotions aside and let's just have a conversation about perspective without involving the emotions and see if we can get on the same page. And then once we are able to get on that same page, then a lot of the times we'll find that a lot of those emotions just sort of dissipate or kind of come down. But we can still have a conversation and talk about the emotions experienced separately. At least that works for me. I don't know if that works for everybody, but I
Yeah.
find it to be incredibly powerful in all things.
It's hard to keep your head about you sometimes when you're in that place, but we are talking about business. It's different when
Yeah.
it's a mom with her children or, maybe spouses, significant other, heated conversations still applies. It would still be nice to be able to set your emotions on the side and maybe show up active listening with a pen in hand, taking notes so that as you're having thoughts come up, write them down and you can come back to those thoughts. We don't have to interrupt, let the person express everything that they need to express and then say, well, here's what came up for me, here's what came up for me, here's what came up for me, and we can work through the process rather than just the reaction and response,
Yeah.
back and forth that oftentimes gets us stuck in a cul-de-sac. We don't ever get out of it. It's just, it feels circular in
Hmm.
arguments oftentimes. So great conversation. Let's open up. If anybody has any questions, I took off the mute button. So if I would love to hear from our audience. If anybody has questions or you want to feedback, I saw on come off of mute. So feel free to come on in here. Do you have any questions for Becky or I or
Yes.
thoughts?
Firstly, I would like to thank you very much for these tools. And you see it very clearly onto how to resolve the solution. And it's not that easy for me to put my emotion aside in both business or at home.
Yeah.
I know I need to work on it, but it's hard for me. And thank you very much for um, showing not only the tools, but also for the exploration after that of what you will get and how you will solve the whole problem. How's the process should go with you to solve that problem. One of the questions that come up with me is that what would you do if the person never take ownership of what they're doing? So you put your emotion aside, you have a conversation, and they just jump in and they say, "Well, let me teach you this. Well, let me tell you, I do this, and I believe that this is right, and you better learn it." And it's just like never take ownership of it and never listen or never have a common ground. What could you do?
Yeah. That's an amazing question.
Can we agree to disagree? That's what comes up for me is can we agree to disagree? But where are you going with this, Becky?
There's a couple of things.
Yeah.
So to answer that question first, there's an amazing tool that I've used all the time in my studies with access consciousness. Um, and that is, who does this belong to? There's two tools. Who does this belong to? And interesting point of view. Access consciousness, it's, I guess I would call it a modality of sorts, founded by Gary Douglas and Dane here. And they do classes and coursework of just about being in relationship and awareness and how to navigate through life. It's very, very powerful. Anybody's curious, go check them out. They're amazing. But they provide these really amazing tools. And who does this belong to? So I like saying that in my head whenever I meet with people of conflict like that. Okay. Where they're not really open to having positive communication. They're not really interested in resolving anything. They're really interested in just staying right about in their perspective, in their judgment or whatever. That's the only thing that's important to them. In that moment, you can recognize, okay, well, everything that they're telling me, everything that they're sort of throwing at me, all the judgment, all the, roadblocks, are they really mine? Like, is it something that I really have to carry, or is it something that's just coming from their aspect of things? Is it something that's coming from their own programming? Is it something that's coming from the things that they were taught or learned from? Is it real for me? Is it something that I'm willing to take on or not? And if it's not something that you believe in, if you don't align with what they're saying, if you're not in agreement with everything that they're telling you, then it doesn't belong to you. And you just have to remind yourself in that moment, I don't have to take it on. I don't have to carry that. That's not mine, that's theirs. And leave it with them and have that moment, like Lisa says, agree to disagree in that moment, but I'm not taking that on and I'm not carrying that. And I'm not going to develop shame around it. And I'm not going to let it affect my self-worth or my self-esteem or the way that I'm going about doing things. We're just in disagreement here, and that's fine. The other tool is interesting point of view, which is this recognition and this acknowledgement that everything that we look at is through a lens of our own point of view and perspective. My life experience has the things that I've learned, the experiences that I've had, the different influences I have in my life have really sort of framed the way that I view things and the way that I look at things. And that is not, that might be my truth. But not everybody had that same experience. Not everybody had that same childhood. Not everybody had those same influences. Not everybody had the same experiences in my life that I have. They have a completely different framework. They have a completely different experience. And those two things might not always be in agreement. But that's their reality, and whatever their conclusion is true for them. Like that's their truth, and that's okay. That's their experience, that's their truth. This is my experience, this is my truth. And that sort of recognition in that moment that none of us are wrong and none of us are right. It's just two different perspectives and awarenesses, and there's nothing wrong with that is so liberating on. It's so liberating. So when somebody comes at you with a lot of judgment, I always, at least somebody comes at me with a lot of judgment, I always remind myself that's interesting point of view. That this is what they believe, this is what they're coming at me with. There must have been something that happened in their life and in their experience that brought them to that place. And it allows me an opportunity and with that awareness for compassion. All of a sudden I'm like, wow, that, for me, what they're saying really sort of triggers me. But if that's their truth that they're operating from, whatever life experience, whatever happened to them that led them to that place, I'm going to extend compassion for them in this moment. And it's such a more loving way to deal with it and to greet that sort of energy instead of just sort of lashing it out and getting angry. Like, wow, like that, you must have gone through something to to come up with that, and I'm just going to choose to look at you through the lens of compassion and allow you just to speak whatever your truth is and know that I don't have to take that on. Just
Kind of letting
allow
go
it to
of what's
be.
right, of being right.
Yeah,
What I'm hearing you say is kind of letting go of being right. It's not about you being right or them being wrong or me being wrong and them being
correct.
right. because sometimes we get this in our head that there's only one way and that there's a right and a wrong. And I don't know that there is a right and I mean, we, morally we have right and wrong things, but we can all have opinions. We can all see things differently. We don't have to be in complete alignment. Doesn't mean that we are in conflict if we're not in complete alignment. We can try to see what other people are experiencing through their eyes, their experiences, their pain, their grief, their joy, their love. When we try to let them just have their opinion and listen, that's kind of what I'm taking away from
Yeah.
what you described.
Yeah, just not being reactive to it, just understanding like that's their truth and they're entitled to that. They're allowed to have their truth. It doesn't have to be my truth. It doesn't have to be mine. I don't have to carry that. But, you know, that's okay. That's okay. There's no right and wrong. There's no judgment. Just allow them to speak and it doesn't have to affect you. It doesn't have to affect the way that you live. It doesn't have to affect the way that you continue to navigate through life. You don't have to accept it, but you don't have to judge it either. Just allow it to be whatever that is and recognize in that moment, okay, this is not going to be resolved and okay, that now I have that information. Like that's not going to be resolved with this person. That's okay. I can navigate and I can move forward now. But I do want to circle back to what you were saying earlier on with the difficulty of sort of separating your emotions. Um I I like to say that I put the emotions on pause. I don't disregard them. I'm not
Mhm.
a fan of disregarding anybody's emotional truth at all. I feel like that's really problematic and destructive. I put emotions on pause to have a more clear conversation. But your emotions are your emotions. Your emotions are just
Feeling.
that
Mhm.
signal telling you that there's something wrong here or um you're an overwhelm. They're really your guidance system and they're valid and they do need to be addressed. I feel like you can have this sort of conversation and then let's go look at the emotions now. Where can we start to heal some of these emotional reactions? Once we're on the same page of what this resolution looks like from a more like broader perspective, now let's go back to our emotions now. Now, like, let's start taking accountability and recognitions for the emotions that came from our conflict and from our disagreement. Maybe there's some apologies that need to be made or some, ownership of, I realized that when I told you this, it was very disrespectful for you. And that was very triggering. And I'm really sorry that it came across that way. Those weren't the right words to use. Or I was, in a moment and I wasn't thinking, I wasn't communicating with love and respect. And for that, I'm sorry and start to heal those emotions. That's a very big, important part of conflict resolution, I feel like, because otherwise, they're still there.
They
And
never go away unless you address it.
they'll get triggered again by something else. And now you have like an emotional reaction that's not just from that situation. It's like what you have in the hard drive of your emotional storage bank all start coming and rushing up at once. So you do need to address the emotional aspect of it and not just sort of pretend like feelings weren't felt.
Yeah, the language around that for me would be, okay, can we set the emotions aside just for a minute and logically talk through, our shared experience, and then come back and the question would be, how are you feeling now?
Yeah.
How are you feeling now that we've talked through this? Is that strong feeling still there? And then get to go dive deeper into it. But yeah, when you're just screaming and yelling. I think creating boundaries too, the other word that popped up as you were talking about letting people have their emotions, that you don't have to take them on, is what are the boundaries that you've created for yourself? How much time are you going to be in reaction with somebody else before you say, you know what, I'm going to take a time out. I still want to address this, but if they can't set the emotions aside, sometimes we need to walk away and let cooler heads prevail and then come back at it.
Yeah.
So how do you create boundaries for yourself when dealing with conflict resolution. That helps to create resiliency, being able to go, refuel yourself, to be able to rest and contemplate things that have come up, and to think about it, and to maybe try to tap into what it is you heard the other person saying, and come to some sort of an understanding or create clarity for yourself, rather than just continuing to go at it, to go at it, to go at it.
Yeah.
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 Well,
And
final
I,
thoughts. Final thoughts on today's conversation. I know we're going to continue this one more week. We're going to wrap all of this up and dive a little bit deeper into some more tools and ideas. But anything else for today, Becky?
yeah, I also find it on the light of this conversation right here at the conflict resolution.
Yeah.
I found that sometimes we call people out is also a way to allow them to express it fully. Because sometimes people go around, they say, "Oh, I'm sorry for all the things that happened to you. Sorry for the way you, sorry that you feel it that way." And I am wholeheartedly saying that well, my feeling, let me take care of my feeling. And here it's what I want to talk about is that action of yours really make me feel not good. It's not that my feeling that you need to say sorry about, it's your action.
Yeah.
So I can take care of my feelings. And you don't need to say sorry for everything that happened to me. That's my responsibility.
Yeah.
So I really love that Becky said who it's belong to. Well, the feelings belong to me, and your actions belong to you. So if you want to make amend or anything, just stick to that instead of having a very general excuse.
Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you for the tools that you recommend, and I think that there's many other ways to use those tools as well. It really make me think of it deeper. So thank you very much for all of
Oh,
this. Yeah.
you're welcome. 100%. Yeah. I'm glad. I'm glad that you saw that so clearly. Like, I'm the feelings are kind of mine to deal with and to kind of do that, but the actions I don't have to take on. That was a beautiful separation. Um, so yeah, that vulnerable conversation, the power of vulnerable communication, Lisa. It's
Yeah.
just so it's so transformative. It's so transformative. Um, and it's not something that most of us were sort of raised or trained to do. But isn't it amazing and beautiful that now, as we move forward and now as an adult, we are allowed that opportunity and the occasion to rise and to just sort of change the new way that we communicate with people and create a new reality around that. I'm excited to be a part of that. And I'm excited to be able to lend my voice to that conversation, Lisa. So thank you for this opportunity.
It's been wonderful. Wonderful. We have one more week. Don't stay stuck. The idea here is don't stay stuck. Speak up. Remember that the goal of creating your own toolbox is to empower leadership, and it's to lead from the heart and from the mind, and foster a culture of growth, resiliency, and high performance. So when we create this space within our team, within our family, within our significant relationships, everybody feels valued when they can be heard and understood. And that only happens when we can allow ourselves to be vulnerable, when we can speak authentically, when we can speak it up and not fear repercussion, where we create an environment that everybody gets to speak up and be heard. So we hope we've given you some ideas around this, and we encourage you, if there are challenging conversations that you need to have, try to have them. Set your emotions on pause, as Becky said, and try to logically engage with folks and see if you can't come to some resolution. Your life will be better for it. Coming up next week, we're getting into pulling this all together, fostering a community culture, whether it's in your family, your community, your businesses, maybe some more tools will come up. We're going to pick Becky's brain. So if you want to tune into that one more time, we're going to do a 5th session with Becky. In the meantime, if you need a bit of advice on how to start or expand your business using social media, I would be available to discuss that with you. You can reach out to me at lisamosbey.com. And then Becky, how do folks get in touch with you?
Oh, they can go ahead and visit www.beckyshe.com, and there's a little contact me forum. They can easily request me and have a beautiful conversation about improving your relationship with yourself and healing a lot of the different blocks and traumas that you have that has kept you from really experiencing radical self-love.
Thank you again. And I hope y'all come back next week. We'll be here one more time with Miss Becky Shee, and then we'll go from there. Who knows what's coming in February? I'll tell you, something to do with love. All right. Thanks, everybody.